Everyone dreams about living an uncommon life, but how we define that dream is very different for each of us. And for most, it's a lifelong pursuit. Welcome to the Uncommon Life Project podcast. We're going to introduce you to people who are living that life or enjoying the journey to get there. We're going to also give you some tools, tricks, and tips for starting or accelerating your own efforts to live an uncommon life, a life worth celebrating and savoring. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Dewhurst and Philip Ramsey.
Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Uncommon Life Project, where I'm your host, Philip Ramsey.
And I'm Brian Dewhurst.
The one and only Brian Dewhurst.
Let's
and
get into it.
Beard looks amazing today.
I'm feeling good about it.
You should. Well, welcome to the show. We're grateful for your time. That's first and foremost. We always want to bring and provide a lot of value. We do have a lot of listeners, and it's so much fun to get their feedback. Positive. Usually it's positive. I've never had anybody be like, you suck at life, which if you have that, I would love to hear it. Again, my name's Philip Ramsey. We have an amazing guest on the show today, as we always do, kind of to go about a little bit different, but I think it's still powerful. So Brian, let's introduce him and let's go from there.
Yes, we have the one and only, the founder of the Shemmassian Academic Consulting and one of the world's foremost experts on college admissions. Dr. Shirag Shemmassian has spent the past 15 years helping thousands of students and families get into top programs around the United States. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shemmassian.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's fun to get you on the show, honestly. Because how did you get to this point where you're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start a business helping other people get into college, which is kind of a daunting process. Let's just address it. How did you start I'm going to make a company out of this? I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, I've never met a child, like in their elementary school or high school, when you ask them, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? No one ever says, I want to help people get into college. Literally no one has ever told me that. And I don't think anyone ever will, but, I'd be happy to be corrected. I was focusing when I was a kid on making it to the NBA before I realized, hey, there are no Armenian guys. I don't think it's going to happen for me. But in any case, I think it all happened organically and out of necessity, for myself, because, my parents came here from Lebanon when there was a civil war over there in the 70s. And, they were able to get out in part because my dad got his master's in Southern Illinois. So they moved to St. Louis before moving on to Los Angeles. And to us, they always preached education. So my brother and me, they gave us what I call the immigrant menu, be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, engineer, whatever. And we just sort of internalized that. Like that was a normal thing that you do. And so we went through school, but then when it was time to go to college, you turn to mom and dad for support. They're like, what? Oh, you wanted us to help you. No. We just have this goal for you. We didn't tell you,
the old T-Rex arms.
Yeah. We never promised you the treasure map, just, that there's something out there and you should go find it. And so I had to learn on my own. I went to a school where we didn't have very much in the way of college counseling, certainly not outside of, the LA area, the immediate area. And so I was self-taught in that process. And when I was having my own success with, undergrad admissions and grad admissions and getting all these scholarships, it was like people coming out of the woodwork and saying, oh, I've sort of had these dreams too, but I didn't know where to look. It was almost like people who were closeted about this, right? And as I was assisting people, they were having a ton of success themselves and referring others. And over time, it just kind of blossomed that way. Again, it never was the kind of thing where there was a vision of, I want it to be like this, or that it would be a business period, let alone, serving the number of students that we have. So again, I think with a lot of entrepreneurial pursuits, it's about scratching your own itch and solving problems for yourself or problems that you see. And over time, it's just, been a blessing to meet all the families that I have and to serve folks that we have.
So the side hustle kind of became the main hustle.
There was no hustle in the beginning even. Right? It wasn't side or main. It was just a labor of love, first for myself and then for other people. And then it went from side to full.
Because you really do think about the college admission, you really just have to do it once, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's kind of dreading it. And then once it's there, you fight through it and you get through it, hopefully. But what you do is kind of give them experience. Obviously, like you've done this with many families. So you can start kind of guiding and directing their path so it can make it a enjoyable experience, not just one that's like everyone's daunting. Maybe it's just me daunting it because I was not the smartest student. But so tell us a little bit about exactly how you help your families.
Yeah, the process.
Yep.
Sure. And, you know, there are different tiers to this whole thing. You know, when you bring up, Philip, about how it's daunting, it's really the case where if you're looking to go to a college, you know, to get a bachelor's degree and move on, it's probably a little bit less daunting. Because we're blessed to live in a country where there are thousands of, institutions of higher education, and chances are you can get in somewhere, right? It's very different, in medical school, which is an area we specialize in, where it's a question of if you will get in anywhere, right? That's a whole different proposition. Now,
Great point.
there's a subset of students, though, when it comes to college admissions, who have specific goals. You know, if you're talking about, I want to go to college and get a college education, it's stressful, but it's not ultra stressful. It becomes ultra stressful when you say, I want to go to a top 40 school, a top 20 school, a top 10 school. Yeah. Because now you're dealing with places that have sub 5% acceptance rates oftentimes. And even though we sort of intellectually understand that it's a very difficult prospect, emotionally, it's something that we've seen ourselves doing, or institutions we've seen ourselves attending since we were kids. Or if we're parents, we've envisioned that for our children, right? So if there's a school that has a 4% acceptance rate, you say, wow, that's really low. But then you're still shocked if it didn't work out, which is kind of weird. Totally. In no other area of life, like for instance, if you're a sports fan and your team has a 3% chance of winning, you don't say, God, I can't believe we lost that one. Right. Right?
It didn't go our way.
But in college admissions, when you don't get into MIT and you always thought you would go to MIT, you're still pretty surprised.
Right.
So it's a very weird domain of life where we have this expectation. We've seen ourselves doing these things. We understand intellectually how hard it is, but emotionally, we don't quite get it until we go through it. And so our job really is to assist families with every aspect of that process. So whether it's, making decisions around course selection or extracurricular activities, how to build that narrative, how to build that extracurricular profile, which will impress, admissions committees down the line, assisting them with summer planning, whom to get recommendation letters from, how to develop college essays, interview coaching for schools that require it. So really end to end in that way.
That's really cool. Now, I'm going to ask this, and I'm kind of mad I'm asking it, so please just forgive me.
Sure.
I've watched the Netflix documentary, The Admission Scandal, the college admission scandal. This is not what you're talking about. I know you're not talking about that, but it's very interesting that how quickly that business took off. And he was doing it fraudulently. So a little bit of background about that is he basically would say he would get your kid into a Ivy school or some prestigious school. And what he would do is like basically pay somebody off on the board that can bring him in. It was scandalous. This is not what you're saying. But how powerful it is to actually help somebody get into a school and do it the right way is powerful. What is your percent of success rate when you're dealing with your families? I would love to hear that.
Yeah. And thank you for making that distinction, because it was funny around the time of the scandal, people would call me and say, you're not part of that, are you? I'm like, no, this is like, and sometimes people would ask me like, do you think others are doing it? I'm like, maybe, I don't know, it's easy to see when something is so high stakes and it's something that people want so bad. It doesn't take that much imagination to see how things can go awry. And, with that specific situation, the way I understand it with Mr. Singer's organization, there were things going on like paying people to take standardized tests on the student's behalf, right? So that's obviously fraudulent, and things like, taking photos of a student participating in a certain sport and being a top recruit when they in fact were not, and getting into top colleges in that way. So there were pretty concerning things. This is not that. There's no There's nothing like that going on, with us, of course. But I mean, to answer your question about, our student success rate, over 90% of our students get into one or more of their top 3 choices. And we've been doing this for a number of years at this point. And so our students, have really high expectations. So, our average student is a major high achiever. They have a 4.0 GPA or close to it. They've done very well on their SAT or ACT, which is, of course, a whole different discussion, as, most schools go test optional. And on top of that, they've done well on APs and stuff like that. And so our job is essentially to take, students who are already exceptional or have shown exceptional promise and assisting them with portraying their background in a way that jumps off the page with college admissions committees. Because I have to tell you, Brian and Philip, that there are a ton of students out there who do exceptionally well academically.
Yeah.
But by grades alone, they're not very distinguishable. So if you think about it, y'all are in Iowa, I live in San Diego, and think about all the different metropolitan centers in the United States, and think about every metropolitan center has several good high schools. And in that high school, there are a certain number of people who are in the top 5% of their class, sure, and all that kind of stuff. And now they're all thrown into the same pool and they're competing with each other. And so you might be the top kid in your school in Seattle, but now you're going up against all the top kids in all the top schools, not only in Seattle, but everywhere else. Mm-hmm. And you have to stand out.
And so probably internationally too, right?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And those numbers, have gone up across certain schools too. So just to help people understand, what the difficulty is here, that's the level of competition we're dealing with. And so I tell families all the time, yes, grades and test scores are important, but don't over focus on that at the expense of everything else. Because look, at the end of the day, a lot of families find comfort in numbers. When you get a 1550 on the SAT and you're given a percentile, you know where you stand. Mm-hmm. When you get a 3.9 or a 4.0, you know where you stand. But when I tell you, all right, rank this essay on a percentile or assign a percentile to it.
Right.
Now it's like, or, take this resume and tell me, what percentile you would assign to this resume. People get confused. So then they find comfort in numbers. They take solace in knowing, well, at least I know how I'm doing in my coursework. So that's where I'm going to spend my time. And this is where people, I think, get in trouble, because then they get to the point of college applications and they've done all this amazing academic work, except it's indistinguishable from everyone else. I call them randomly well-rounded students. They've done a little bit of this, a little bit of that, had this leadership position, did this other thing, but there was no cohesion across these different experiences. And so our job is to build that from the ground up, and also to make sure that they're communicating it through their essays in a really compelling way.
Philip and I were just talking about, we were updating our marketing and stuff, and the bio, it's just like the worst thing. And we made a company policy of like, you're not allowed to write your own bio anymore, because it's one of the hardest things to do. So I couldn't even imagine. I mean, that's essentially what you're saying. Like, you want to be one of the top 5% of people in the country to get into these institutions, and to write that and portray that individually, or maybe just even as a family unit where you're pretty blinded to, the success and the metrics that are important. It is super helpful to have that outside third party to say like, hey, but wait, have you thought about this, and that? So
absolutely. It's really awkward to talk about ourselves.
Well, for some people, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. for most of us, I guess, yeah. But also it's kind of a bummer for these students, because, okay, A, we might not like talking about ourselves, or B, not know how to do it, and C, not know how to do it in a very compelling way for the purposes of college admissions. And, for some of these kids, it's the most important set of essays they've ever had to write in their lives, and they're being asked to do it for the first time, during that high stakes process. So it's like, okay, this is for all the marbles. Oh wait, I have no experience doing it. Good luck.
Shirag,
and it's very scary.
I wanted to go, how many people do you have in your business?
So I don't answer, questions about organization size like that. But I mean, we serve a limited number of students every year. Please let me know your question behind the question, and I'd be glad to talk about it.
Well, how do you do pricing? This is what I was going at. Like in something service oriented, I would love to know, like, well, what do you put a price to of like getting into the college that you want, right?
Sure. Yeah. So for that, we have plans, for students who are applying to a certain number of schools, and that's how we assist them. So the most popular plans we offer are for the application. So let's say a student comes to us between junior and senior year, right? And they want help with a certain number of college applications. We have 3 plans. They're called the Premium Plus, and the Ivy plan. And based on the number of schools you want our assistance with, 10 versus 15 versus 20, we help students on a comprehensive basis, meaning there's unlimited advising and essay brainstorming and unlimited number of edits for all essays for that number of schools. So if you take the base plan, it's called our Premium plan, where we'll help you on a comprehensive basis with everything you need for 10 schools applications. That one's $14,999. And then up from there. So the 15 school plan, which is the most popular historically, that one is $17,999. And then that way, parents don't have to wonder, will you help with the answer is yeah, that covers everything one would need for comprehensive support with that. It also includes support with waitlist letter preparation, as schools have, had bigger and bigger wait lists. Also appeal letter preparation, which is a thing if a student gets rejected from their single top choice, they can appeal. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, kind of. But how did you get the pricing? Like, I'm just going to throw this out there. Like $14.99 sounds good. Like there had to have been a reason. And the reason why I asked this is we have a lot of people on our show that are thinking about starting a business. Hey, you had a great idea, but like, how do you do a pricing? And to me, if you don't get the pricing right, it's going to be an uphill battle for you. And that's the reason why I'm like, but how do you do the pricing? Like,
yeah, happy to talk about that. So every single person I've spoken with who has started a business has told me, and I'll confirm this for myself too, what the prices are today were not what they were.
Different than,
yeah. That's almost always the case. And there's an art and a science. I mean, what do most of us do? We look at, other competitors and we see what they're charging. That's one way to do it. Other people will, think about, okay, like what's my happy price? Like what should I do it at where I can, be happy with it or sustain a business or what have you. But most of us, if we're being honest, like when we're starting out, we don't know how to price things.
Amen to that.
And usually, I'll call it 99% because I'm sure there's someone out there who, didn't do this, but we undercharge. Right. And in the beginning, when I think about the level of support that we've been providing, sort of unlimited brainstorming, unlimited editing, all that kind of stuff, it's a lot of time. So if you break it down into like people say, well, how many hours? I mean, it's a lot. I've never counted because it's unlimited, but it's a lot of hours. And so when you think about that, your dollars per hour, becomes a big factor. But then, over time, I would say back in the day, the plan now that's $14,999 was probably around $49.99. So it's become 3 times now. Not because necessarily the time has changed, but also and experience, but also the value, right? Right. So when you think about what top schools mean to be, whether it's going to a top college or to a medical school or whatever the case might be, I think more so than hours and dollars and all that kind of stuff, what's the value and what's the demand? So if these schools are so hard to get into, but we can help increase your odds of getting in several fold, there's a lot of value in that. There's even more value than what we're charging, right? True. And so based on that, I believe it's incredibly fair and justified. Another thing to think about is demand. As you do more work and serve students and they have tremendous success, they tell other people, as we've written more resources for students to get into top schools and, more people have come to us for support because they've heard about our work, then there is greater demand. And, I want to serve as many people as I can, but we have a pretty sizable wait list now, only because, and we could grow and do things, just for volume, but that's not ever how I want to approach my work. I want to make sure that we're supporting, a sustainable number of students and giving them high quality.
Right.
And to do that, we have to, charge the investments that we do. And so that's the way I think about it. And I understand that it's not going to be accessible for everyone. And we have certain, partial need-based aid programs for families who qualify and things like that. But at its core, I really think about value. I really think about demand. I really think about, how hard we work in helping our students and families achieve the results they want. So I think it's our investments reflect those things.
Yeah,
Totally.
you deal with a lot of high caliber people, really just listening to you and kind of like you're talking about the families that are focused solely on the quantifiable metrics or the, the numbers, so to speak. What is the common thread that you see or that you're advocating to your clients, like that authenticity of the student and bringing that out? Like, what is the thing these students should be focusing on outside of maybe the grades and the test scores?
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as that kind of like competitive advantage?
Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. There's nothing specific that a student needs to do. So let me give you an example. Sometimes parents will, have a student who is interested in science, right? And so maybe they love engineering, and, what you should do is a little bit more clear there, right? Maybe it's having certain, key internships at prestigious institutions, or starting your own project, or maybe even starting your own business where we're building something and selling something, whatever the case might be. And so for those students, parents have a pretty clear sense of like, okay, this is a pretty serious thing. Science, we've seen the path of, where science can take someone down the entrepreneurial route or make a big impact in their community, all this kind of stuff. Where it gets very tricky for families is if their student doesn't have an interest that's seen as traditionally impressive. Usually the arts fall in that category. Okay. So if a student might love cooking and be excellent at cooking, the parents will oftentimes talk about that as quote unquote just a hobby.
Mm.
So, okay, yeah, I know they're good at cooking. Yeah, but it's just a hobby. But what's the serious thing we're going to do? And so that's when I think students and parents could be at odds with one another. And now students are being forced to join this club and this thing where their interests aren't really.
Mm.
But I believe that every single student can develop a compelling profile in whatever their area of primary interest is. I don't care if it's engineering. I don't care if it's cooking. I don't care if it's photography. I don't care if it's coding video games or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
Because let's say, for instance, that, there's a student who loves to cook, and I would understand, well, what about it do you like? And they can give me all sorts of answers. So they might give me the answer of like, well, I just want to create the perfect dish. Okay. That's a different answer than I just love the way food brings people together.
Mm.
Because the student who answers the former, well, all right, well, let's develop the type of profile where you are, developing an incredible culinary background and, showcasing that. And who knows, maybe you eventually help other people, cook better and all this kind of stuff. Maybe you develop a cookbook for teens or whatever. There are so many paths we can go down.
Right.
But let's say if your goal is to bring people together, okay, who do you feel like needs to be brought together? Well, maybe there are certain families where the parents work a lot and they're not really having joint meals together. And so you want to help, I don't know, families cook simple meals or that kind of thing, or, assist with teens working with their parents on cooking meal and bringing that joy. Or maybe it's certain people who can't really afford a good meal. So you develop a program in your local community where you provide really beautiful, really healthy meals for families, and then grow a network of that in your region, in your state, in the country, and so on. So whatever your interest is can take you down different paths, even within the same domain, and be very impressive.
Yeah.
And then also, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think why I kind of was going in that vein is, we obviously, our kind of, thing is we feel everybody has something that is uncommon about them, you know, and that tapping into that passion. And, as my oldest is now a freshman in high school, we're recording this and we're starting to have those conversations about high school. And, she's actually very I'd say narrowed in where she, wants to, I would say, apply, and the professions, there's a spectrum of professions within her interest. So we're having those conversations, and so I'm just kind of curious, maybe just as like, a parent about to go through this, but also professionally, of just like, how do we as a country, or how as a business, or as a collective, help the next generation tap into, what is making them uncommon. And I kind of hear you saying it in your way. I think we're saying kind of the same thing. And so what have you seen, I guess, from, parents or successful students, where they're tapping into that uncommon or that passion at a younger age?
Sure. A few things. I think that we, as I'm a parent of a 3.5-year-old and a second on the way. So not quite in high school. Yeah, thank you. Not quite in high school yet, but I think it's important for us as parents to shed what we think can lead to a successful career, right? I think that when, some of us were growing up, like when I was growing up, we didn't have the jobs that existed today, or that exist today, I should say.
Right.
And so we have to be mindful of that. And not think, when we were growing up, or what our parents did, these were the jobs that were available. Well, that's changing all of the time. And the way that, marketing has changed with the rise of the internet and social media, and also the way, technology has allowed things to scale, and how essentially anyone can access information about anything that interests them at any time and from anyone. That's a whole different thing. And this is just 2022.
Right.
And so by the time your daughter goes through high school and college and, all this kind of stuff, but we also act like, as parents, like we knew what we were doing back then. Right. It's funny to me because when I was 14, I thought I was going to do certain things. I don't do any of those things now. But we expect our 14-year-olds to know, and we're upset with them if they don't have clarity sometimes. Yeah. I'm not saying you, I'm saying, I see this kind of thing a lot.
I needed to hear that because I was one of those people at 14 who did know what they wanted to do, and I'm actually doing it. So I think sometimes I don't get upset with my kids, but I think I come maybe with a little additional, layer or emphasis of like, more so just wanting to invest in them. But one of the things you touched on there kind of led me to another question. With social media now, I mean, do you guys have like a triage program? Like if you've got, they look great on paper, but there's
you're
social
a hot
media.
Mess. You're a hot freaking mess.
Take those pictures mess. Down. Like what is that like now in this landscape?
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing that we'll discuss with our students. I encourage our students to keep all their settings private, and to not invite people to check stuff out, or to be a follower or whatever it's called on different platforms, unless they know who the person is. But still, to be mindful of what you're posting and what you're putting out there, because I think you can actually leverage it really well, or you cannot. And I'm throwing social media around because that's such a sort of common thing to dunk on these days. But you can still use personal websites and LinkedIn's and all this kind of stuff. Essentially, there are ways to explore things and to develop a community. However, so if a student is really interested in one field or another, they can leverage all sorts of technologies. And what I'm saying is that there's more reach we can all have. Like, I don't know that my, that my organization could have been what it is today, pre-internet, because we've put out a lot of resources online for what it takes to get into great schools and stuff like that. And it's kind of crazy to think, when I was in high school, there was probably not even 10% of the information out there freely available about college admissions or medical school admissions. I remember hearing in like our Model UN club, I remember where I was sitting in high school, when someone literally wrote on the whiteboard, like we had a consultant from outside for Model UN, someone who had coached it a bit before, who came and wrote on the board, use Google. So Google is this thing where and I was like, and it's so silly right now because everyone knows what that is. But I remember in like 11th grade not knowing what Google was.
Right.
And then I went home that day. I was like, whoa, you can find a lot of stuff here, And so it's just like, and we don't know by the time that our kids are in high school and college and beyond what will be available. So I guess my point to parents is saying to maintain an open mind and understand that we're living in a world where there are a lot more opportunity, a lot more ways to achieve success. And so it's more so a question of where to hone in our children's interests rather than wondering if there's anything out there for them. Because there certainly is. We almost have we're spoiled for choice. So if your student is showing an interest in something, promote that, because at least they have some clarity and focus in a world of infinite options, and to not, bring our bias into it of, well, this is serious and this other thing is just a hobby.
Right. I played football. You're going to play football, or
exactly. I took my kid to soccer practice. He literally didn't care. He was, he was just lying down on the grass and making, what I call grass angels, but nothing to show for it in the grass. But he just wasn't interested. Right. And it was weird because as a parent, I'm like, but I always thought he'd be like an athlete and all. But he kind of doesn't care, and maybe that'll change. But we have to shed what we thought they would be.
How long have you been married, Shirag?
I've been married now 6 years.
Nice. How long have you had the business?
It's a great question. So I've been doing this work nearly 20 years. The business with the name that we have today and all that kind of stuff, it's been 8 years.
Awesome.
Nice.
All right, here's my question. So how instrumental has your wife been in this, or your spouse been in this pursuit of this company?
She's been incredible throughout all of this. I mean, there's been a lot of sacrifice, certainly, throughout our relationship, about, time I would spend on working on, our website or certain resources or processes that we've been developing. When she, wished I had come to bed earlier.
Amen to that. Yeah.
That still happens, to this day. And so that's been a huge thing. She's also, but I think that the biggest influence that my wife has had on me in this context is just, I think, developing a sense of peace with things. As an entrepreneur, you worry a lot about, getting things right and serving people the right way, or are there things that we can improve, or is there this student we want to work with but they decide to go somewhere else, all this kind of stuff, and just maintaining perspective of it's going to be okay, it's fine. She has an incredible presence about her, where she has I think her disposition is it's fine. That's just sort of the way she goes about life. No matter what, it's fine. And so that's something that has rubbed off on me more and more over the years, because I would describe myself much more as type A and, achievement oriented and all this kind of stuff. And she's more I just want to live peacefully kind of thing.
Yeah, she's calm. It's funny. We've interviewed a lot of people and a lot of businesses, and I love asking that question, because without a supportive spouse, just throw it in the bag. It isn't a good decision. Sure. And it is something that they're kind of behind the curtain in a way for us to do what we love to do. But the sacrifices that our loved ones do to have us do what we love to do and pour out and serve other people is significant, and one that we should absolutely talk more about. And so if you're listening to this and you have an amazing idea to go serve people, it's not that it's a bad idea, but your spouse needs to be your barometer. Is this a good idea? This is a bad idea? Because both of you are going to have to do some sacrificing. Mm-hmm. So I love that you talked about that. That's good. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And with, children, there's, that's been magnified, more than ever, because now when it's not just you're not spending time with your spouse, you're also not spending time with your kid when you're working. And also there are childcare responsibilities. It's not like when you're not together, she's getting a manicure, right? She's taking care of our son, and that means so much.
I think it's going to be interesting culturally, with COVID. And, I was actually talking about this with my wife the other day. Working from home, as much as we all have in all of our different professions, it's really impacted every, nook and cranny, I think, of the economy over the last 2 years. And I think kids seeing their parents in that way at home, it's going to be interesting to see kind of the ripple effects of that, I think, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And I think it'll be actually a positive thing as well. And so anyways, I was just kind of thinking about that.
So how do our listeners hear more about you? Go to your website and do that deal.
Yeah, I mean, folks can visit shemmassianconsulting.com. If they want to get in touch, there's always going to be a contact link in the top right corner of every page, and they can reach out that way. But also, if people want to have a resource on something super specific, they can always type my last name, which I'm sure you'll include in the show notes, and whatever that subject is. Like, for instance, if it's like Shemmassian, how to get into Princeton, you can search for that. If it's Shemmassian, when should I take the MCAT? If you're interested in medical school, you'll find that too. So, I encourage people to find our resources in that way. And if they want to get in touch, it's very easy to do so. They can email us at contact@shemmassianconsulting.com or fill out any form. I'll see that, and I would love to assist.
Awesome.
Well, you've been listening to the Uncommon Life Project. Thank you so much for being on the show. And if this resonated with you, please go find out more information. And until next time, go be uncommon and impact somebody.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.
That's all for this episode of the Uncommon Life Project, brought to you by Uncommon Wealth Partners. Be sure to visit uncommonwealth.com to learn more about our services. Don't miss an episode as we introduce you to inspiring people who are actively pursuing an uncommon life.